Hey everybody! Good evening, good night. Thank you for joining. We're gonna let everybody roll in here for a couple minutes. I know some folks are finishing up work or finishing up dinner or what have you. Appreciate you being here. I think it's a really fun topic tonight. We're gonna get into unlocking the power of map layers. I'm sure you've used some of them, but hopefully you'll find something tonight you haven't tried, and hopefully that helps you to get out there and do something cool, have a good adventure. So. All right. Well, we're going to get started. You're here, I'm here. Welcome. This is one of our advanced master classes. So we have these classes almost every month to really go deep into sort of, specific topics to make sure you're getting the most out of onX Offroad and you get out there and find the trail and the adventure that works for you and you love. And so um, glad you're here. Let's get into it. So I am Adam Zolek. I'm your host for tonight. Welcome. I go by Bantha Overland on the internet, and if you see me out in the trail, you'll see me in my F350 and my truck camper, and you'll often see me there with my adventure buddy Val. Hopefully, some friends, because there's nothing better than being in the middle of nowhere with some people you like being with. And so, yeah, I hope to see you out there too. I'm on a mission to inspire and enable more people to get out there along that trail, and I also really love dispersed camping. I say I'm an off-roader and I'm a dispersed camper, and that makes me an overlander, I guess. I don't know. I just love being outside. It's good for my soul. If you want to learn more about me, you can check out those things, but we're here to talk about onX Offroad, so we're going to go ahead and get into it. So, um, I always have this slide in every master class, and I have it because it's the thing that I love about onX the most, and it's the thing that keeps me coming back. And it's, in onX Offroad in Canada and the US and Baja, there's 650,000 miles of off-road trails. And I think that's super exciting, right? And it almost becomes too much. It almost becomes a question of like, well, what's the right trail for me, right? How do I find my form of adventure? And so I'm really hoping that's what this masterclass and other masterclasses do, really help you dive in and find those miles and those trails that you're going to love and the people you travel with are going to love too, right? And find some really cool places to go play because public lands and these trails are our playgrounds. And I love being out there. So before we get into it, I see some of you saying hi in the chat. Keep doing that. Say where you're from. I'd love to hear where you're from. Love to hear what your rig is, and if you're on a trip or got any trips coming up. Um, there's also a Q&A section, so we have some really awesome customer success folks on that know onX Offroad frontwards and backwards and upside down, and they'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So if you have a question, put it in that Q&A. We'll make sure it gets answered tonight, or if we need to follow up, we'll make sure we follow up. But put whatever else you'd like in that chat. Feel free to chat with each other. Hopefully, maybe you'll find a friend nearby that wants to go out and run some trails together. Also, this will be recorded and be posted to YouTube in a day or two. And so I encourage you to follow along in your device. But, if I'm going a little fast, you're like, oh, I missed it. What did he say? Go back, watch the recording, practice as much as you want at your own pace. You can even make me go at 2x. If you want to skip over some stuff. So we have lots of great recordings from some past master classes as well in there. So check that out. All right. Well, let's get into it. So tonight, to get into those layers and unlocking all of the goodness that's in those layers, we're going to go over four things. And so we're going to start with base maps because base maps are really like the OG layer. They're the map we see most often, and onX Offroad is purpose built to support off-roading and overlanding. That's why there's onX Hunt and onX Backcountry and other apps. And so that base map is really built for you as an off-roader, and has the things that you probably need most often. So we're going to spend some time in there going through everything and make sure you know everything that's going on in there and not missing a thing. We're going to go through layer by layer and talk about what the layer is, what kind of questions you can answer, how you can use it. Then we're going to talk about your layers, like how can you have information you can turn off and turn on. And then we're going to talk about offline layers and making sure that once you leave home or you're not connected anymore, you don't have connectivity, you can still use all this goodness even when you're in the middle of nowhere. So we're going to go ahead and get into onX Offroad. Now, I'm going to start here in onX Web. I'm just in a web browser. You can do this on your iPhone, your Android phone, your iPad, your Android tablet, CarPlay, Android Auto. There's like so many places you can use onX. I'm going to show you web because this is often where I start planning and dreaming about trips. And then when I'm out there in the field, I use my iPhone or a tablet or something like that, and I hook it up to my truck, which has a little display. So I'll show you that a little bit on my phone, a little bit what it looks like in my truck and things like that, but I'm going to start here in the web. But you can do everything everywhere. So, if I show you how to do it on the web, it might look a little bit different on mobile, but it's there. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this is the United States, right? It's probably our playground. I assume most of you are calling in from somewhere in the US, looking at everybody's location there in the chat. And actually, in the chat too, if you haven't already said it, tell everybody why you go out there. Like, do you do it for the drive? Do you do it to camp? Do you do it what is it? What's your motivation? I'd actually love to hear that a little bit as I go through these layers. I'll try and target, what everybody's interested in. But this is our playground, right? And so this is the base map of onX. When you open up onX, right, you're going to come in here and you're going to see a map like this, or if you have a mobile phone like this, you're going to see your dot, right? And that's like one of the coolest things over paper maps, right? Like we have our dot, we know where we are. And so I'm just north of Denver, right? And so this is the base map, and there's a lot of information packed into this, so I really want to dig in a little bit more. All right, I see dispersed camping. I see some off-roading. Yep, dispersed, really remote campsites. Yay, Denver. Thank you. Yeah, right. Lots of motivations for getting out there. So the first thing to know about the map and any of these layers, right, is as you zoom in and zoom out on the map, you're at different zoom levels, and those different zoom levels will reveal more information, right? So like if I start hitting plus here, what's going to happen? Oh, there's all these areas that I might want to check out. If I keep zooming in, what happens? Oh, the land shading gets a little bit different, right? We see this green that we know means it's U.S. Forest Service land, or we see this yellow that means it's BLM. Then we start to see all these trails, these green trails, the blue trails, the guided trails, the other off-road trails, right? And so that's something I always suggest thinking about. Like I'll show some of it tonight, but as you're in these layers, try zooming in or zooming out a little bit to see what the difference is. Like I'll give you a good example. We'll look at the dispersed camping layer in more detail here in a second. But if you come in here, and I'll show you that again, here's the layers, this little stack here. I'm going to come down and turn on dispersed camping. You see all these little yellow lines, and we'll talk about what that means, right? But if I zoom out, instead of looking at individual roads, I'm going to start to see these little allowed symbols, right? So I'm getting information about a large area versus if I zoom in here, eventually I'm going to get the specific information about the trails. And so just think about that when you're using any of these layers, right? Do you want to be zoomed in? Do you want to be zoomed out? What makes the most sense for what you're trying to do? So that's one thing about these layers. Now I'm going to show an area I like to show a lot in these master classes because I just think it's cool. Pole Mountain up here near Laramie and Cheyenne and Wyoming. I just like it because I think a few less people go there. So, if you go there, don't tell everybody. But it illustrates a lot of different things I want to show you. So one is, we can use this first layer, the base map, right, to see who owns land, right? So we can zoom in and we can see this is Medicine Bow Route National Forest. It has a little U.S. Forest Service icon. We can zoom in over here. It says Bureau of Land Management. And one of the things I love to do in onX is just tap or click anywhere in the map and it'll tell you about the spot, right? So I just click here. It says, oh, the BLM owns it, right? I click over here. It says, what does it say? It's like a mystery. Let me click again. There we go. Medicine Bow Route National Forest. How many acres, elevation, the ranger district. This can be super helpful. I often call up a ranger, check on conditions, ask, hey, what's a cool spot to camp? Where should I check out? Right? And so you can always click anywhere on the map to figure out who owns land, right? And then the thing we probably all love the most, the off-road trails, right? And so this is also just part of that base layer, right? We have all of the trails that we're allowed to drive on. We have everything from huge honkin', Interstate 80 here to paved roads like 210 here, which is a county road, right? To these beige roads, which are off-road trails that we have confidence that we're allowed to be on. And then we have some of these trails that awesome trail guides have gone out and run and added even more information about, right? We have trail reports, right? That say what the conditions were. And we have a photo, right? We have blue trails, which are a little bit harder, right? We have its distance, we have its technical rating, we have the time, we have suggested seasons, we have a written description, We have these cool photographs to say that looks cool. I want to be there, right? And so this is all baked into that base map, right? It's always there for us, right? And we even have things like this is why I like this area. It has lots of examples, right? We have all of these points of interest, right? We have TH, we have trailheads, so Pole Creek Trailhead. We have all of these little dotted lines, which are non-motorized trails, hiking trails or biking trails in this area. We have campground POIs, right? And so all of that rivers topology is all baked into the map. And even something like sometimes people get confused by these, so I like to go over them. You can actually sometimes even see these roads that are a little they're like ghosts. They're like ghost roads, and these roads actually come from OpenStreetMaps, and they're there. They're not necessarily open. You can't go on them. It's not one of these onX roads that onX is styling and saying like, yeah, you can be on this green trail, you can be on this beige trail, but they're there. They're physically there, and that's what OpenStreetMaps is about. It's about ground truth, right? What's really out there. And so if you're ever interested in that, go Google it, OpenStreetMaps. But one of the cool things about onX is that the data on this base map, it comes from hundreds of data sources, right? It comes from the US Forest Service NVOM data layer. It comes from the BLM road network layer. It comes from national parks, state forests, state land management agencies. It comes from OpenStreetMaps, which is like the Wikipedia of maps. And so there's hundreds of sources that are all baked in, and we don't have to think about it, right? You may have used another tool where you're, turning on this and turning off that, right? And sometimes that can be awesome, but sometimes it can be a headache. And so I just like to note that like this is the base layer, and I think it's like the 80-20 rule, right? There's a lot just in that layer that you can take advantage of, and you don't have to worry about turning it on or turning it off or anything like that. All right. So I want to show you a couple other base layers, and then we're going to get really deep into these layers. So over here on this little hamburgery menu, I'll call it, or the little stacked layer menu. If you click it, you're going to get four different base map options. And then if you go to layers, or you just scroll up and down, you're going to see a bunch of layers. So just going to go through the rest of these base maps so you have an idea what's going on. Now, right now we're on Topo. So I like to think of this for a couple different reasons. One, I think it's the cleanest view. Like if you're just trying to have a fairly simple map, it has, basic colors, public land, forest, BLM, private land, major roads, things like that. Has the guided trails. Now you can switch to satellite, right? And you can really start to figure out, oh, this area looks dry, it's brown, it's desert. Oh, I see trees here, right? Um, and one of the things, sometimes people will actually say on these layers, I wish this green box weren't on top of this, right? I can't see what's below it. Well, it's another one of those things where the more you zoom in, right? We're not only we're going to see more detail, but eventually that green layer is going to go away, right? At this point, there's no green layer. We're just seeing the satellite imagery, right? And we can see there's trees, looks like some rocks, looks like there's a creek in here, and we can even switch back and forth between topo, right? And we can see some of that terrain without the actual ground cover. We can switch back to satellite, or we can switch to hybrid. So hybrid's going to put those topo lines back on there. And so if you're not great at just, staring at a satellite image, right, you can now say, oh, this looks like a high spot, right? I want to go stand there. This is the place to go stand. So maybe I'll check out this trail 701E and take a little hike to go up there, right? So cool base map, cool base layer. The other one I really love, and I use this definitely in the spring and the fall, sort of the shoulder seasons, recent imagery. So recent imagery is slightly fuzzier than the other satellite imagery, but what it gives us is the ability to see if there's any, snow on the ground, if there is a lake that has a higher or lower level, it's refreshed every 2 weeks. And so right now we're looking at it from July to August. But if we click all dates here, we can actually go way back. Like let's say, hey, I was thinking of coming here in November of the coming year. What did it look like last November? And if we come in here, right, we start to see that it was pretty snowy, right? And so it can be a great tool to check out an area and say, well, do I want to try and disperse camp here, right? Or we were looking over here, there's a campground, maybe that would be easier to get to, maybe they plow it, right? It can help us to make some different decisions based on when we're going to visit and what kind of conditions we're looking for. Maybe you love snow wheeling. Does anybody love snow wheeling? If you do, then you might be looking for deeper snow, or if you're using the snow layer, you might be looking for snowmobile trails, right? So everybody's adventure is different. onX lets you find your adventure, whether it's this way or that way, whether it's easy and laid back, or you want to crawl over 30-inch boulders, right? So those are the four base maps I think of: satellite, hybrid, topo, and recent imagery. Definitely, they can be sort of like layers. So certainly think about, what information is already in there and look for it. One other thing that I believe onX just updated was uh, the gas station layer. And so I think there's something like 400,000 gas stations that just got refreshed on here. And so, that can be a big deal to us, right? Like, how far are we from getting gas, from running out? And so for this example in Pole Mountain, sometimes I'll just look around the map and I'll see, oh, Laramie looks like it has quite a few gas stations, right? There's a Shell, a Sinclair, another Sinclair, right? And so sometimes I'll drop waypoints to indicate stuff like that as well. So all of that is just, baked into the base map, and um, yep. And then I use pink for anything I haven't done. I know it's weird. You can pick whatever color you want, but I use pink for anything I haven't done. Just gives me a consistent map. All right. So I'm going to pause there. I know that was a lot. I'm going to check in with Melissa, who's helping me to run the event, and see if there's any good questions maybe we should dig into a little bit more.
Hey Adam, you're doing such a good job. Everyone seems to be enjoying the masterclass so far. No outstanding questions, but I do want to remind everyone that our customer service team is in the Q&A. So if you've got specific questions about the app or even your account, you can drop those in the Q&A. But no open questions about base maps.
Sweet. Okay. So you all signed up for layers. We're going to get into layers, and we're going to spend lots of time in layers. So let's get to it. So I'm just going to go through these layers one by one, and we're going to talk about, what they're for, what you might use them for, some nuances, and then if there's some questions, we can dig into that too. So uh, first, I'm going to turn on, actually, I'm gonna go slightly out of order. I'm going to turn on private land, and I want you to watch what happens. Watch over here to the left of the green area. You see these red lines come in? That's private land, right? And for any of these, you can read what it is: private property boundaries and ownership info. You can always click the arrow to the right and see if there's more info, right? So it'll say, right, a little bit more about it. We'll see how some of these actually have keys and different options and stuff as we get into them. And I'm just going to close the layers for now. You can either click the layer icon here, or you can click the X and the little modal that pops up. But as we start to zoom in, we're going to start to see the name of the person or the people or the company that owns that land. This is private land. This is owned by the Mountain Land and Cattle Company. If we were to click on it, we would also see it's owned by the Mountain Land and Cattle Company. We can see the tax address, the acreage, the owner, right? And so I often use this for the purposes of, making sure that I'm camping or traveling on public land. But some people use this for all sorts of stuff. Like sometimes when I forget someone's address, I just come up in the search box and search for their name and switch to private land. And you can find people's property, which is pretty useful. Um, so that is the private land layer. And I want to show you this. I'm gonna pull up my phone real quick because I sort of want to show you how it's similar here. So I have my phone. Again, we have the layers over here, little icon. I have topo selected as my base map. And then I'm going to come over here and turn private land on. And then I'm going to come into this Pole Mountain area, which we were looking at in my web browser. And there you go. There's the Mountain Land and Cattle Company. I can tap on it, right? I can see who owns it. And so very similar functionality on mobile as well. And if anyone else has other use cases for these layers, like please put it in the chat. I would love to hear about other use cases, both greedily and it's just, an interesting thing to hear. And also, this is one of the elite features. So if you're deciding, which level of onX you want, onX Elite gets you access to this private land information, including who owns the land and all those specifics I just showed you. All right, so we're going to turn that off. And, honestly, actually, we're just going to leave it on. I leave it on all the time. I think it's a good layer to have on all the time. I'm going to turn on the dispersed camping layer. So again, I want you to watch the map and see what happens when I do this. You sort of saw it before, right? A lot of these roads are going to have a yellow outline. And so I'm going to turn that on. You see most of the roads get that outline. This one does not. But if you come in here, right, and you click into the more information for dispersed camping, it tells you which road segments are designated for dispersed camping according to U.S. Forest Service regulations, and lets you know where camping is permitted. Now, um, if you've traveled much on public lands, I'm going to make a very broad statement, but if you're on BLM land, I always say you can probably camp unless there's a sign that says you can't camp there. If you're on national park lands, you probably can't disperse camp there unless it says you can. Like Death Valley National Park, a huge, very remote park, right, has some options for that. U.S. Forest Service is the tricky one. And so I think that's why onX started with U.S. Forest Service to highlight these roads and where you're allowed to find dispersed campsites. And so I just like to call that out. Like in the past, you had to look at these very archaic NVOM maps to try and find this information. And so this is very helpful. Now, one thing to know about, dispersed camping, if you've never done it, is just because a road is highlighted doesn't necessarily mean there is a campsite. It just means it is legally open for motorized dispersed camping. And so generally the practice is to find an established site that someone has already used. There's a fire ring, there's a little dirt trail leading to it. And that is generally the kind of site you're going to look for, and those don't always exist. Some places are super remote or just not that popular. And so I want to show you how we can actually use this layer, the dispersed camping layer, along with a different base map to try and actually get more ground truth about where there might be cool campsites. So one thing that you can do for some layers, like we saw on the property ownership layer, you could click on the map and get more information when the layer is turned on. Same thing with the dispersed camping layer. So if we were curious, hey, can I camp on 701H? I could click 701H and it says dispersed camping allowed on both sides of the road. That's why it's highlighted on both sides. Some roads will only be highlighted on one side. Most you're going to see are going to be on both sides. And it says you can travel up to 100 feet, right, for the purpose of dispersed camping, right? So we know sort of a distance. And if we come in here and actually turn on our satellite layer instead of our topo layer, we start zooming in a little bit, we can actually start to look for dispersed sites, areas that have been disturbed for camping, right? So there's a telltale sign. There's a trailer right there. So someone's camping when the satellite flew over. And you can see this little spur road, right, that goes over here. This other one goes over here. This other one goes over here. And you can even use tools, like you can use the draw line measure distance tool to say, well, how far is that off the road? Right? 223 feet. I mean, generally within 300 feet, like it's okay. It's an established site. There probably would have been a sign pounded into the ground if the Forest Service didn't want you there. But we're not going a quarter mile. We're not going 5 miles off the trail, right? So we can use the dispersed camping layer with the satellite base map to come in here and find, looks like another area here, right? You could come back here and camp. And so think about using those together, the base map with the layers or even multiple layers, as we might see here in a little bit. So that's the dispersed camping layer. Now, there's a really good blog post that onX has that talks all about motorized camping and how it works on different types of lands and different types and different regulations and stuff like that, so you stay safe and you have a good time. We're going to share that in the chat so that you can read that later after class if you want. We also had a really great advanced masterclass a couple months ago on finding awesome dispersed campsites using onX Offroad. So if you weren't there and that's something you care about, go find that on YouTube. Check it out. It's a good masterclass. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn the dispersed camping layer off. Okay. And often, again, when I'm driving, I'll often leave this turned on, actually, because, I might be hunting for dispersed campsites and I'm like, it's one of my main motivations. I know for some people, your main motivation is off-roading and driving amazing trails. For me, it's dispersed camping. And so I'll often leave this on. And as I'll show you in an example a little bit in CarPlay, I can just sort of see as I'm driving down the road, oh, this cool thing that I'm looking at right over here is legal for dispersed camping. And so it just really helps me to connect the data and the information with where I actually am. All right. So another layer is the precipitation and radar layer. So I'm actually going to turn that on. I'm going to come in here and go back to Topo for a second just to sort of simplify my map a little bit. I'm going to zoom out and we're going to see if there's any weather. Actually, I'll check my weather. My weather looks great. Up here near Cheyenne, it looks like there's some storms coming over here in eastern Colorado and western Nebraska and Kansas. Looks mighty rough. I always wave to the clouds out my front door and say, "Sorry, Nebraska." I hope you're not in Nebraska, and I hope this isn't over you. But so you can use this. Now, a couple of these layers do better if you have connectivity, right? It can't refresh where a storm has moved in the last hour if you're not connected. And so I'll talk about offline maps a little bit more at the end, but things like the dispersed camping and the land ownership and everything, right? When you download an offline map, you get that data as part of the offline map, right? It's just simple. It's there. If you said this area is important, I want to download it offline. Things like weather, right? Things like temperature will cache. So like you might be able to pull them up in the app, but if you don't have connectivity, might be a little challenging to get that. And we'll talk about in a second how you can use the cell phone layer. So if you are in a situation where you feel strongly like you need to go get some more data because you see some smoke and you're wondering where a wildfire might be, we'll talk about how you can use the cell phone layer to maybe go find some data so you can get that updated again. Also in this example, I'll zoom in here so we can look at this lovely purpleness. This is one of those where if you come in here and you uh, do the more detail, it'll just sort of oh, I'm thinking of temperature. Never mind. But basically, you've probably seen this 1,000 times. Purple's worse than red, worse than yellow, etc. Right? So similar to precipitation, temperature layer. So that looks hot. Does that look like a hot color? It looks like a hot color. So we'll go back up here to Pole Mountain, where I was looking at before. You can see, it's sort of this yellowy orange. Over here, look at this, right? Some place called the Snowy Range. That looks like it might be cooler. So this is the one I was thinking of that has the little scale. So you can see yellow's probably 60s, 70s, right? Whereas in Pole Mountain, it's probably in the 80s. And so this layer can be useful if I often will pull this up, and say, man, I want to go on a trip this weekend. Where do I want to go? And I'm like, do I want to go east? No. Do I want to go west or north or south? Probably, right? And so it can be a good way to look at it like this. Also, in the shoulder seasons, if you're looking for really cold weather or more temperate weather, it can be a really good way to just sort of zoom out and see, where you might want to be and where you might not want to be. And then, since we're talking about weather, I'm actually going to show you weather too. So not officially a layer, but I consider it very much um, a layer in a way. So let's go back here to the Snowy Range, where if has anyone been up here? It's a really cool area, right? And so there's another good example, right? Here there's no lakes, but when I zoom in one more level, right? So sometimes you got to zoom in to get the detail. So let's say I'm curious, at the Sugarloaf Campground, what the conditions are. I can click weather. And when I click weather, I'm going to get these crosshairs. And this is like, where exactly do you want the weather for? And so one of the cool things about this is, when you're in really remote places, some weather apps will try and find the nearest town. So like, even though we're maybe 30 or 40 miles to the west here of Laramie, Wyoming, and we're probably a couple thousand feet higher, some weather apps will just be like, oh, you're in Laramie. It's hot, right? But that's not what it's like in that specific place, right? With that elevation and that slight distance change. And so you just put the target on whatever you're checking the weather for, and then it'll get weather for that specific location. So we can see the wind, the temperature, all right, we can see sunrise and sunset information. We can get a weekly forecast, and then we can also see an hourly forecast, right? So it looks cool right now. That looks wonderful. Looks like partially sunny. That looks wonderful. Looks like a little windy. So something to think about. So, um, I might just sort of go through the forecast here and sort of say, hey, what do we think it's going to do over a couple days, right? And so I actually use this all the time because I just love being able to drag this target to different places where I actually am or where I'm gonna be. So I think that's super cool. So that's weather. Um, you can go through current this week. You can go through hourly if you want to get a little bit more of a tabular format, and then moon phases. So if you're doing astrophotography, you're taking a night hike. I've learned that people do all sorts of fun things under the moon. Maybe you off-road when the moon's out. You can also find out that information as well. All right. So we've gone through dispersed camping, private land, precipitation, temperature, and weather. Um, I am going to skip air quality for 1 second because I think it makes a little bit more sense in context of active wildfires. So I hope none of you are near an active wildfire right now. Some of you probably are near an active wildfire right now. So I often will have this layer on, especially from maybe June or July through the fall, active wildfire and also wildfire smoke. And so let me turn that on. Now, nothing changed too much. You can see the map is a little foggier here, right? You can see that smoke. I'm just teasing it here. But when we get way out, right? So this smoke has been welcoming me at my house. It's been down near Denver a little bit. Looks like right now it's going up to Cheyenne or Fort Collins. But right now we have the Leaf Fire, and I always say, I wish I didn't have any fires to show you, but I'm glad that this information is in here because it can be super useful if you're planning a trip. If you're going somewhere this weekend, you might want to say, I don't know if we want to go there. Don't want to bug everybody that's fighting the fire or evacuating, or maybe you're even just going a couple 100 miles away, but you think you're going to be in the smoke, and that's not going to be fun for anybody. And so, a couple different things I want to show you here in the fire layer, or the official name here is the active wildfire layer. Um, so one is there can be a slight difference in icons. So if you just see a little flame like this, it means that there's a reported wildfire. If it has the circle around it, it means that there is an established perimeter, which doesn't necessarily mean it's huge or small, but often a fire with an established perimeter is going to be a bigger deal. And so that's one thing to look out for. I often also just look out for this smoke kind of plume. So let me just show you what this looks like if I turn the smoke off. This is the wildfire smoke layer, right? And so these two layers together, I think pair really well to see what's going on. So if we look at this leaf fire, for example, and let me just I'll turn the smoke off for a second just so we can see what's up. So a couple things. So this area, this red area is the perimeter. It's the official perimeter that was updated fairly recently from the folks that are working on the fire. Um, and you can also click on a fire. This is one of those interactive things like dispersed camping or private land where you can get more information when the layer is turned on. You can get the name of it, Lee, when it was last updated. If you're worried about having, fresh data, if you're on like 1 bar of cell signal and you're like, what's going on? Percent containment, and then information source if you want to try and learn more about it, right? And so this is a great resource. Now you might be wondering what these little dots are, and I love this. I actually think this is even more useful than the perimeter sometimes. So this is satellite detected hotspots. So this is fairly real time monitoring. It's almost like someone in a fire tower in a satellite in space. This is where, and it makes sense. It's at the perimeter, right? These are the hot spots in the fire. So this is where there's an active fire burning or they're mopping up the fire. And again, it gives you a sense of like, okay, like on a lot of these fronts, it looks like there's activity. Whereas if we look at its next door neighbor, the elk fire, you can see, many less hot spots. Um, yeah. So if your life is in danger or this is impacting your home or something like that, I would encourage you to use all of the resources available to you, not just onX, but this can be a great tool to make sure, you're where you want to be or you're not where you don't want to be. I'm going to put that smoke back on. So I'll put that smoke back on. And then, yeah, density of smoke, right? And so darker colors, worse. right? And so you can see most of the west right now is under this sort of persistent gray, and then we get into the yellow, we get into the orange red, and so that's the worst smoke right now. This obviously shifts over time, right? And up there in Canada, it's real bad. So this is, it can look pretty gnarly when there's a lot of fires going. And you can tell the wind direction is sort of everything's sort of going northeast right now. Okay, so use that layer a lot just to make sure I'm not getting into trouble, or if a fire crops up near me to figure out what it is, what its name is, find more information about it on the other websites that go into more detail. Another somewhat related layer is historic wildfire. So historic burns of the last 12 years. So, if you spend a lot of time around fire, you know that some fires are worse than others. Some just ravage an area and some sort of pass through it gently, and may promote even better growth very shortly, right? Versus devastating an area for decades, right? And so we're going to turn this layer on. Now you're going to see here again, this is one where as you zoom in, things are going to show up. So you can see these yellow areas. If I toggle this layer, we're going to have it come on and come off, right? So up here in Colorado, we've had some historical fires. This is the Cameron Peak fire from 2020. It was a really big fire. And so you can come in here and you can look at this historical wildfire area. And again, this is something where sometimes it can be useful to use this in conjunction with other base maps. So I know this area is burned. So if I want to come up here and turn on satellite, I can actually come in here and look at it and try and get a sense of like, it looks like there's still greenery in the area, right? And so, but over here, this does not look so good, right? And so you can start to get a sense of like what areas of the forest may have been hit harder, and whether or not that's an area that you still want to be, based on what you've seen. Again, as you zoom in, that yellow transparency will sort of go away, and as you zoom out, it'll get a little darker. But you can see all these standing dead and fallen trees here, and then some green stands over here, etc. So if I was coming in here and looking for an off-road route, I might come in here and investigate. Oh, it looks like it goes through some green stands, right? And then it comes through here and it comes through burn area. And you can just decide if that's your kind of adventure, or probably carry a chainsaw or two with some extra fuel to make sure you're equipped to move some trees, especially if you're coming through early in the season, or there was a recent windstorm or something like that. And that's fun for some people. onX has done some awesome trail revivals this year. Google that if you're not sure. But just reopening trails, getting trails back in good condition. And so it can be fun to get out there with a chainsaw and help clear the trail. We hope it doesn't happen, right? But sometimes that's the way it goes, right? All right. So that's the historic wildfire layer. And then the last three layers I have here are cell phone layers. So you can pick your provider, whether you have AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile. I have Verizon right now, so I can turn that layer on. And if you go into the detail, there's sort of a key, right? Darker red's better coverage, more 5G. And then if you get to more like pink, might be voice or text only coverage. And so as I zoom in and out here, again, you'll see sort of a different level of fidelity. But you see there's a lot of pink, so maybe just text and voice coverage. And then the 5G cells are a little bit more sparse. So if you're looking to get away from the world, this may be a great place to go versus, if you're trying to take a long weekend and work a little bit, right? You may start to hunt around for other options, right? You may come up to Pole Mountain and say, looks like service might be a little bit better up here in this northwest corner, right? Not a guarantee, right? But definitely an information source to use, or you can just bring your Starlink, and you'll probably have coverage. So the cell phone coverage map can be useful as well. And different providers definitely show up differently. If you look at AT&T, for example, sometimes they can have slightly better coverage in the middle of nowhere, but it really just depends where you're going. You can see on the western side of Pole Mountain, AT&T, a little bit, maybe a little bit darker color. I don't know. Let's zoom in here and see. Yeah, 5G. See all these little 5G markers. So it could be better. right? I mean, your results will vary, but definitely a way to know if you need to prepare for other communication or if you're going to be off the grid or you're going to be on the grid, whatever whatever you're looking for out of life. Okay. So, a lot of layers. So we went through how to turn the layers on, how to turn the layers off, how the zoom levels can affect the layers, how some of the layers have keys, or other things you can click on once you're in there. One other thing I want to show you, and then if anybody has some questions about that, we can come back. So if you have a question, put it in the Q&A if you haven't already. We'll come back and dive in a little bit deeper. I just want to show you how that works if you're in a vehicle. So in my vehicle, I have a little display, and I use this information. I use some of these layers when I'm out there driving as well. And I just want to give you a sense of how's that different from right now when I'm just here at home in a web browser. So you might be wondering how this works when you're in your car, your truck, and you're off-road, and you got CarPlay up or Android Auto, sort of like this setup here. And basically, whatever layers you have on your phone are going to mirror to your head unit, to CarPlay or Android Auto. So here you can see I have the topo map on. I have dispersed camping and private land. This is often what I have up when I travel because those are sort of important to me. Make sure I'm on public land, look for cool places to camp. And you can see here on my head unit that we have the same area and you can see the same things, right? We have the private lands, the red outlines, we have the forest roads and the guided trails highlighted there with yellow, where you're allowed to disperse camp. And so you're getting sort of the same information. And then if you go through some other layers and turn them on, you're going to see that information mirror on your head unit as well. Here's another example where I've turned on the active wildfire and wildfire smoke layers. And you can see here the nasty leaf fire that is sending smoke my way here in Denver. This fire is out in western Colorado. And if you look at my head unit here on CarPlay, you can see in the same area we have the leaf fire. We have the satellite detected hotspots, which is just sort of cluster of the yellow colors, and then you can see the smoke going off in the distance. And then we can see the elk fire to the east of it as well. So whatever you have on one is going to mirror to the other. But sometimes I still like to use my phone to have maybe a more zoomed out view like that, so I can sort of get an overview of where I am, and then use my head unit for a little bit more of a specific close-up of the specific area I'm exploring. All right, so pretty much the same thing, right? It mirrors, but I like to use, I have two screens in there, so I can have one zoomed out, one zoomed in, one on where I'm going, one on where I'm navigating. And so, yeah, it can be helpful to pull up various layers there as well. I see Benjamin asked a question about CarPlay layers, so hopefully we answered your question. Melissa, before I go over one or two more things and wrap us up, I'm curious, any good questions about layers we should dive into a little bit more?
Hey, Adam. Yeah, so a reoccurring theme that I keep seeing pop up is people are asking about a gas station layer. I think that there might have been some confusion when you zoomed in maybe near Denver and showed some gas stations possibly or near Laramie.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. So, one thing I didn't show you, I'm going to open up layers here. There's this map legend, um, and this gives you a sense of everything that's always going to be in all the base maps, right? So it has all the motorized trails, the types of trails, the land ownership, Forest Service, etc., and it has points of interest. So these points of interest, including gas, are actually baked into the base maps. So whether you're in Topo, or you're in satellite or what have you, what you're going to see is when you zoom in far enough to start seeing these little, like this picnic area, this campground. So let me zoom out. You'll see some are there. So right about there, right? Um, we'll start to see gas stations as well. And so before when I was showing gas, it was just showing, if I'm in Laramie, which is a city, which is probably where gas might be, you can see these little icons for like a shell, a shell. This is the one I marked before that I think was the Sinclair. And so you're just looking for these little icons like this, and then you can drop a pin. So when I added this pin here, I just went and added a waypoint over here using this add waypoint tool. and then I dragged it to a gas station like this Safeway fuel station, maybe a Safeway, so I get, discount. Um, Picked an icon, gave it a color, and that's how I did it. So yeah, it's not necessarily a layer all by itself. Like you can't just zoom out in the United States and see every single gas station, but if you know where you're going to be going, you can sort of zoom in and then hunt around the map to find gas. And like I said, feel free to turn stuff off to simplify the map. So, turn off dispersed camping, turn off private land, go back to that topo layer. You can even turn off HD topo if you want, which simplifies it a little bit. And then it might be a little bit easier to just quickly scan the map and say, oh, there's gas, there's gas, there's gas, things like that. Good question. Any other big questions we should dig into a little bit?
No, Adam, I don't see any open questions right now. Customer
Okay,
service is still in for a few more minutes. I did drop in the email and phone number for customer service, so if anyone
sweet.
has questions, they can reach out tomorrow as well.
Okay. So there's two more things I want to show you before we wrap up. One of them is sort of your layers, which is really just a fancy name for folders, but that's how I like to think about it. So in a folder in onX, I'm going to go over here to my content. So I love hot springs. And so previously, I started a folder called Hot Springs, and I put a bunch of different waypoints that I've marked around the country. And so I want to show you how I use this like a layer, right? And you can think of this. This could be information you put in here. It could be something you import, right? So if you travel like on BDR routes, or you have GPX files, or you have waypoints you've gotten from somebody else, you can load all that in here and put it in a folder. Um, and one of the reasons I say folders are like layers is because I'll show you. I'm going to zoom out here so we see quite a bit. You can come in here and do all sorts of things to hide and show things based on folders. So you can come in here in my content and you can say, hide everything. So it just hides everything on my map, right? And then you can come back and you can say, I just want to see this hot springs, right? And see how that's like a layer, right? I have these couple in Oregon, one in Idaho, one in Wyoming, one down here in New Mexico, right? And so I can turn that on and off on the map, right? Which is super cool. And so I like to think of that like a layer. There's other cool things like you can share it with a friend, and you can collaborate on a trip or cool spots or something like that. But yeah, I just love that ability where you can hide everything on the map and then come in here and turn on specific things like that. And I basically now have my hot spring layer, which is pretty cool. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to show you is offline maps. So it's probably one of the most important things you do. It's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward, but everything we just went through tonight is either requires connectivity, a cell phone signal or Wi-Fi or something like that, or it requires an offline map. And I think an offline map is a way easier way to do it. So it's just assurance that, even if you don't have connectivity and you thought you would, you have what you need. So I'm going to come back here to Pole Mountain, to this area we were looking at before, right? And let's say, I want this, right? I want the base map. I want the topo map. I want the satellite map, right? I want the layers. I want the dispersed camping layer, right? I want all the things. I want the land ownership, right? The way to make sure you have that data if you don't have connectivity is with an offline map. And so I'm going to go to offline maps here at the bottom of my phone. I'm going to select new map, and you're going to see I get this nice box where I can sort of pinch and zoom to say, do I want the snowy range over here? Do I want Pole Mountain over here? Right? I'm going to get the area I want. You can pick your resolution. Now, if you go into here and read all the detail about what you're actually picking, one thing you will learn is that you're really just picking the satellite imagery. So, if you're like, hey, am I going to get the dispersed camping? You're going to get the dispersed camping. Am I going to get the topo? You're going to get the topo. Am I going to get my waypoints? You're going to get your waypoints. The thing you're really deciding is that satellite imagery, right? How likely are you to be sitting there on a map going, where else is there a dispersed campsite? Or what's the tallest thing I can climb on? What's it look like on the satellite? And that may be important to you, right? So if that's super important to you, pick high, right? If it's not as important to you, I normally pick medium. And so I pick medium. I hit next. I give it a name. So we'll just call it Pole Mountain. I'll show you this. I actually, I often actually name it the year, the month, and then where it is. So that helps me to keep it organized a little bit by when I think I'm going to do these things if it's a trip. And then I can hit save. And you'll see here, it's just going to download. And I'm on a Wi-Fi connection, which is way more predictable and stable than a cell connection. And so I'm going to do this here near Denver. And then when I go 2 hours north, I know I'm going to have all that good stuff, including medium resolution satellite imagery. So make sure you do your offline map. We should also call it offline layers. It's really offline everything. And then when you're done, you'll actually see this green box here, right? And green means good, right? So green means you have the offline map, you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about it. Um, I'm just going to remove this. Yep, thought that would work. So you can see this red dotted line. If you ever see this, it means that an offline map is not downloaded on your device. So if you created the map on web and then you open it up on your mobile phone, or you download it on your phone, but you want your travel partner or your travel buddy to download it, right? You always want to make sure this is a green box. And so if it's ever not a green box, come into offline maps, hit that download button. Once it finishes downloading, you'll get that green box again, and you're good to go, right? Green is good. Okay, so that are all the layers in onX Offroad. Do not forget about the base map that is, specifically made for off-roaders. That is combining those hundreds of data sources for trails and those points of interest. It's really got so much information in it. Zoom in, zoom out, explore it. And then if you have specific things that are going on, like you're trying to figure out, is there snow? Can I camp here? Is this private property, right? Is there a fire? Use those layers, turn them on, off as you're planning, as you're out there in the field to make sure you have a good time and to stay safe. All right. I know that's a lot. Hopefully you found something new, something you're going to try. If you did, please drop it in the chat. I'd love to know what you took away from it, or what was new to you, or what's going to help you get out there this weekend. I certainly hope something does help you to get out there soon, whether it's this weekend or in the coming weeks. And I really do hope to see you out there on the trail, especially if you're in my neck of the woods. Until next time, I'm Adam. And I hope you join us for another Advanced Masterclass. I think we have one in October about finding an awesome trail for your fall adventures. So until then, bye.